We all love the minor pentatonic scale, and it's the starting point and cornerstone of just about everything on the guitar, it seems. And if I'm teaching a beginner, then first or second lesson I'm probably going to be introducing the minor pentatonic scale. But because it's so loved and so widely used, it's very easy to find yourself playing the same kind of things and falling into those classic rock and bluesy cliches. Now, I've actually got nothing against cliches, and sometimes that's exactly what's right for a given musical situation. And the minor pentatonic is such a big part of the history and the language of the guitar that there's really no ignoring it. And in fact, I've just released a beginner soloing course. Don't worry, this is not going to turn into another advert for my course, but the focus of that course is on those cliches and those standard minor pentatonic ideas, which are such a big part of learning to play the guitar. But what this video is going to be about is trying to use that minor pentatonic scale in some less obvious and less conventional ways. And I'm going to give you my favourite ways of going against or subverting that natural bluesiness and classic rockness of the minor pentatonic scale. And I've got 5 or 6 ideas. If you've got any further suggestions or ideas about how you might go about doing this, then do let me know. I'm going to begin by having a play, and I'm going to try and demonstrate some of the ideas and concepts that I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. Let's talk about some ways that you can use the minor pentatonic scale without sounding like a blues lawyer then, with apologies to guitar playing members of the legal profession who are also fans of this channel. I'm sure there must be a few of you. And this term blues lawyer, for better or worse, has just become a kind of shorthand for that kind of passionless, cliched blues playing, which is really horrible, but seems to be everywhere at the moment. So I'm going to give you a few ideas. Some of them you might like, some of them you might not like, but it's all about experimentation, and then you can bring your own taste and judgment into play. And of course, in a real musical situation, you might want to mix some of these approaches with some more conventional approaches to minor pentatonic soloing. The first thing we could do is try and introduce some wider intervals. Now, with a lot of those blues and classic rock licks, we're really just moving up and down the scale by scale steps, so just moving to the next note in the scale, never really getting any very wide intervals. So one thing you could try as a starting point might be to skip some of the notes in the scale. So I'm just going to demonstrate this with the A minor pentatonic scale position 1, just to keep things simple. And we could do this exercise, so starting on the root note and then skipping the next note and going to the 3rd note in the scale. So we've got the 5th fret on the low E to the 5th fret on the A, and then the same thing, so we go to the 2nd note in the scale and we skip. We've got C going up to E and so on up the scale. So you've got a pattern that's mostly based on fourths. I don't think all of the intervals are perfect fourths, but you could call it a kind of fourths based exercise. And straight away you've got an interesting, more angular kind of sound. It doesn't sound at all bluesy, this exercise. And then for a variation on that exercise, I like to reverse every other pair of notes here. So if we're thinking about these pairs of mostly fourth intervals, we can go up, the first one and then down the second one, and carry that pattern through the exercise. So really interesting sound. At this stage it's still an exercise, but you could easily extract ideas from that and use bits of that to create some interesting licks. So that's fourths. If we skip another note, you've got an exercise which is mostly based on fifths. So that would sound like this. We're starting on the root note, then we're skipping up to E, and then C, up to G, and some of the time here we're going to have to use some string skips as well, and we just carry that pattern on through the scale. And we could do the same thing with that. We could reverse every other pair of notes. Very cool sound, that one. And if we skip one more note, we've got a pattern which I suppose is mostly based on sevenths, or though there are probably some sixths in there as well. I don't think you need to be too theoretical about this. With the minor pentatonic stuff, a lot of the time it's just a shape based thing, but that would sound like this. And a lot of these exercises also very good picking exercises. It's very good for your picking hand accuracy, just skipping strings and clearly playing all of those notes. And why not skip one more note, and then we'll have a pattern based on octaves. Quite a difficult one to play smoothly, that, because we're string skipping, sometimes skipping two strings with that particular pattern, but it gives you a very wide open and interesting sound. So that's the basic idea. Obviously you could apply that to any of the minor pentatonic shapes and experiment all over the fretboard with those kind of ideas. You might also like to think just more generally about string skipping. That's a very obvious way of introducing wider intervals into your playing. So a string skipping exercise might be something like this one, where you start on the low E and skip a string, then go to the next string over and then skip from there, and then reverse that. And you could take that to some of the other patterns if you wanted to. What about double stops? And here I'm obviously not talking about the usual kind of Chuck Berry type double stops, but what if we can get some different sounds? So the kind of things that I like are quite close intervals, so seconds, minor seconds, and that kind of thing. So often, again, I'm just thinking visually with these minor pentatonic shapes, and you can get these kind of sounds. So if we've got a G and an A there, that kind of second sound, and you can take that shape through the minor pentatonic patterns. Or you could take it horizontally up the neck as well. So those are some quite interesting sounds to play around with, I think. So take it over onto the other string sets. nice to include the flat fifth there sometimes as well. Triple stops can be quite interesting to play around with as well, so you can just visually connect up these little triple stop shapes through the pentatonic pattern. So you could start with this shape here against A minor pentatonic and then just take the notes along each string to the next note in the scales. It's the nature of the minor pentatonic scale to be quite positional and boxy, and you find yourself locked into these box kind of shapes. So you might want to go against that and start thinking a bit more horizontally. So what about if we tried putting 3 notes on each string rather than the normal 2 notes on each string? So again, I'll demonstrate this with the A minor pentatonic. And if we start on a low E string, which is the lowest note available to us, then 3 notes on each string, A minor pentatonic would look like this. So straight away you're thinking about that scale in a different way, and you might be able to use those kind of shapes and patterns as a source of some new and interesting licks and ideas. Another approach I like is just working with a pair of strings and seeing if you can connect through the different positions of the scale. So we could start down here with this little box shape, and then using slides just connect into the next pattern of the scale. So into our next little box shape there, slide up to the next one, and so on up the fretboard, and that can be a really good way of coming up with some more unusual ideas. A simple one might be not to use bends and vibrato, or at least to think about when you use bends and vibrato. I think with a lot of this bluesy stuff, the default is just to add a lot of bends and vibrato and ornaments to almost every single note. So it can sound very, very cool, but you don't want to be mindlessly doing that. What if you were to play a phrase or a melody with none of that stuff? You may or may not like that kind of sound, but it's certainly an interesting and different approach. Quite difficult to do, actually. I found myself wanting to add vibrato to any of those sustained notes, but interesting sound, a bit more piano-like, I think. So you've got those pure sustaining tones rather than giving it that bluesy wobble on every single note. One thing that I like to do quite often in my own solos is to throw in open strings in almost a random way, just to add a bit of unpredictability to things. So if you're using the minor pentatonic scale, usually you're going to have one or more of the open strings available to you depending on what key you're in. So if you're in the key of A minor, then I think all of the open strings apart from the B string are in the A minor pentatonic scale, so you can use all of those open strings. If you're in the key of E minor, then all of the open strings are going to be available to you. So you might like to try something like this. If you just take a standard minor pentatonic scale pattern, let's say this, kind of descending scale sequence that you hear a lot in those kind of classic rock solos. What about if we replace a few of those notes with open strings? So we could go, and straight away you've got a little bit of unpredictability there. One further idea might be not to use the expected minor pentatonic scale in a given situation, and this is something I touched on last week. So if, for example, you're in the key of A minor, obviously you've got the A minor pentatonic scale available to you. That's going to be the first and most obvious choice, but you've also got two other minor pentatonic scales available to you. So in any minor key you've got three possible minor pentatonic scales you can form out of the 7 notes in the key. And those minor pentatonic scales, I like to think of them as corresponding to the minor chords in the key. So if you're in the key of A minor, you've got the 1 chord, the 4 chord and the 5 chords are all minor. So in the key of A minor you can play the A minor pentatonic scale. You could also play the D minor pentatonic scale, which is the pentatonic of the 4 chord, or the E minor pentatonic scale, which is the pentatonic of the 5 chord. And that's just going to give you some different sounds. All of the notes are still going to work because they belong to the key, but it's not going to be the expected minor pentatonic sound. So you could even get away with playing some of those bluesy cliched licks, but in a new context. So if you play your E minor blues licks in a tune that's in the key of A minor, maybe that could create some interesting tensions and sounds. I'm using my Jazzmaster today. It's a 60s reissue Jazzmaster neck pickup, and I'm going into a Vox AC30, and again it's a reissue Vox AC30 from sometime in the 1990s, I think. And I'm running that amp quite clean. It's one of those AC30s where you really need to turn it up loud before it breaks up. So generally in these kind of situations I'm running it clean and getting overdrive from pedals. So the clean sound is like this. Add a bit of overdrive from the J-Rocket Archer. And then some delay from the MXR Carbon Copy. So there we are. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and hope that you're able to use one or two of these ideas in your own playing and soloing. I will be tabbing some of this stuff out and I'll put that up on my Patreon page. And that's about it, I think. Oh, there was one other thing. What was it? Oh yeah, buy my course. Fantastic new beginners soloing course, very reasonably priced. Details on my website. I will see you next week. Bye bye.